Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Supporting Native Pollinators in Backyards to Barnyards with our speaker, Connie Crancer. This webinar is presented by Washtenaw County Conservation District, and this is our second in our 2023 Native Plant Expo and Marketplace Speaker Series. I'm Drew Mark Wilson. I am the Outreach Coordinator for Washtenaw County Conservation District, and I'll be your host today. If you are unfamiliar with the Washtenaw County Conservation District, we are a local unit of state government run by a 5-member board of publicly elected directors. Since our founding in 1948, we just celebrated our 75th anniversary. Our mission has been to assist residents with conserving, managing, and the wise use of natural resources in Washtenaw County. In 2020, a countywide millage was passed to expand our capacity and services, which include the Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program, also known as MEAP, conservation assistance for local, state, and federal cost share opportunities, educational and conservation workshops, webinars, and in-person seminars, annual resource distributions such as for trees and shrubs, native plants, rain barrels, and even composters, a lending library for tools and equipment, and more that you can find on our website at washtenaw.org, and we will also add that in the chat. As I mentioned, this webinar is part of our speaker series for the Native Plant Expo and Marketplace event, which brings together native plant nurseries, landscaping companies, conservation organizations, and more in one convenient location for Washtenaw County residents. Save the date this year for the event held on June 3rd from 9 a.m. to 1 at Washtenaw Farm Council Grounds. Native plants will be available to purchase in person from numerous nurseries at the Expo event. Additionally, you can pre-order over 50 native potted plant species for the Native Plant Expo and Marketplace, and about 40 varieties of trees and shrubs for the spring tree and shrub sale. That can be found on our online store. This is at store.washtenaw.org, and I will add that in the chat as well. We are currently accepting vendors and sponsors to apply for our Native Plant Expo and Marketplace, and we'll share that application link in the chat now. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge our initial sponsors for this event: the Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner's Office, Native Community Services, Huron River Watershed Council, Monarch Watch, David Borman, LLC, Restoring Nature with Fire, Mathai Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum, Pollinator Partnership, Adapt Community Supported Ecology, Legacy Land Conservancy, and Feral Flora. Thank you to our vendors and sponsors.
Hey, Drew.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looks like our slides are not advancing.
Oh, okay. Let me make sure I get through that. Thanks, Summer.
Sure.
So that's us. All right, and there's our sponsors. Thank you again. If you missed the first webinar in our speaker series, Restoring Nature with Prescribed Fire, this was our speaker, Dave Borman. You can watch that recording on our YouTube channel along with our other educational videos. The third and final presentation in this speaker series is called A Year in Blooms Through a Pollinator's Eyes with Vince St. Marie of Windy Rock Farm and Nursery. This will be an in-person event, and it'll take place at the Dexter Township Hall on March 16th, next week, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. You can sign up for this event on our website, and we'll link that as well in the chat. Next, I'd like to introduce Summer Roberts. Thanks, Summer, for getting me through the slides.
No problem. Drew, if you could just advance the slide to the next one. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Summer, and I'm the WCCD Community Forester. And today I'll be tracking your questions for our presenter. And I did see that we're having an issue with the chat. I'm going to try to figure that out once we get Connie started. So hopefully you all be able to communicate in the chat. But please, if you want to ask a question of the presenter, or if you have a question for Drew or myself, please put that in the Q&A so I can keep track of it. And you'll see that little Q&A icon probably at the bottom of your screen. And we will plan to reply to you in that Q&A window, or we'll ask Connie live at the end of her presentation. And we want to let you know that we are recording today, so you'll be able to watch this again if you've got, if you want to see it again, or if you want to share it with someone else, it'll be on our YouTube channel. And we'll also put some links and resources on our website as well. So I think that covers it all, Drew, and back to you.
Thanks again, Summer. Next, before I introduce our speaker, we wanted to take a quick poll to better understand all of our attendees. It can be a little bit lonely as a webinar speaker or host, so it's nice to take a few minutes to get to know our attendees and what you're hoping to learn today. So it should pop up on your screen, the first question. And our first question is, where do you live? A lot from Washtenaw County. About 11 people so far from outside the county, but still in Michigan. And we even have about 6 people outside of Michigan, still in the US though. Give you a few more seconds for you all to answer the first poll question if you just logged on. A lot of people locally. Great, thank you for answering. Got a lot of local people here. And it's nice to see that we're reaching people even outside the state. Awesome, thank you. We're gonna move on to our second question. How would you describe where you live? So this is our second poll question, if you don't mind taking a moment to answer that. We love seeing where you guys are, what you guys are doing in your own yards, what's your scenery, what's your goals. A lot of people in rural. Nice, a few farmers, that's great. We have 4 living on a farm. Even urban, suburban, awesome. Thank you all for answering that. We love seeing where our people are coming from, and maybe that could help direct some of the questions that get asked later, how to answer that. Now for our third and final question that should pop up on your screen. What is preventing you from incorporating native plants on your property? And I just want to point out that this third question has a lot of options for answers, and there is a scroll bar that you can use to see all of the options. So there's more than what you initially see. So if you don't mind taking a moment, reading through that, I'll give you some extra time too. We want to hear from you all. We have a lot of people saying nothing's stopping me, but I'm excited to learn more. Some saying need assistance with plant selection to meet site conditions and goals. That can be a big headache prepping the area. Lack of resources, tools, time, money. We even have some people addressing that deer and rabbits eat all your plants. We get calls like that all the time at the Conservation District. How to prevent that from happening. Hopefully we can address some of these concerns during the call or webinar. I'll give you just another moment if you still want to answer this third poll question. Awesome. Thank you all for answering these poll questions. It's really nice to hear from you. And thanks for participating. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Connie Crancer. Connie has been a Michigan resident most of her life. She attended Michigan State University for her bachelor's in horticulture and University of Michigan for her master's in terrestrial ecology, where she had a 26-year career at the U of M Botanical Gardens and Arboretum. While she worked on her master's, she served as a native plant specialist on the natural areas team. In addition to being in Pollinator Partnerships, Michigan NRCS Pollinator Liaison and Project Wingspan State Coordinator, the longest title ever. She lives and works on an active farm and focuses on sustainable, conservation-minded farming practices for pollinator beneficial insects, birds, and other wildlife. She's doing great work. Welcome, Connie, and I will turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you. Let me do the screen share. All right, can you see that, Drew? Can you see my?
I can.
Okay.
I can see your presentation and you.
Oh, good, you can.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I can't. Oh, no. We practiced a lot, didn't we?
We did practice. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, Drew and Summer. And thank everybody for attending. And thank you, Washtenaw County Conservation District, for inviting me to speak on pollinator conservation in our backyards and rural landscapes. Before I get started, I would like to introduce you to Pollinator Partnership, or P2. Pollinator Partnership is the largest nonprofit organization solely concerned with pollinators. P2's mission is to promote the health of pollinators critical to food and ecosystems through conservation, education, research, and collaboration. I'm able to speak to you today through a collaborative program with NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Service. And before I continue, I'm going to give you a tip. If you want to capture my slides, use your Command-Shift-3 function on your Mac keyboard or your Control-Shift-3 on the PC. They will be screenshots and they will go to your desktop. It's one of my favorite tools when I watch webinars. So when we talk about the world of pollinators, it's a highly diverse group of species, birds, mammals, and other lesser known species, and a multitude of pollinator insects, including bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, wasps, and ants. Altogether, this highly diverse group of species estimates over 200,000 known pollinator species worldwide. and bee species make up 10% of those, one of which is the European honeybee. In North America, we have over 4,000 native bee species, and in Michigan, over 400 native bee species. As we think about creating or enhancing habitat for pollinators, we need to consider their different adaptations to the environments in which they evolved. I'll start with bees. Bees differ in lifestyle behaviors. Some live social lifestyles, but the majority live a solitary lifestyle. Bees range in body size, foraging ability and range, rely on different floral resources, and also require different nesting and overwintering habitats. Small solitary bees may travel only 300 feet from their nest site to foraging areas, while honeybees can forage up to 2 miles from their hive. And there are some larger bumblebees that can travel up to 8 miles to forage. Lepidoptera, or moths and butterflies, are also a highly diverse group of organisms. Worldwide, there are over 160,000 known species, and here in North America, there are over 14,000 species. The second bullet point in this slide is crucial when considering habitat for butterflies and moths. Lepidoptera require certain host plants as part of their reproductive cycle. Pollinators are highly important to global and local biodiversity. They are the glue that holds the natural world together and allow it to function as we know it. Animal pollinators provide ecosystem services that are vital to planetary health, ecosystem integrity, and resilience. 85 to 90% of the flowering plants worldwide, that's approximately 350,000 to 400 plant species worldwide, either depend on or are enhanced by animal pollination for successful reproduction and genetic diversity. I love this quote from E.O. Wilson: "A land without insects is a land without most forms of higher life." Pollinators are keystone species. They enhance ecosystem biodiversity, they maintain functional integrity, and provide ecosystem services. And pollinators also serve as the foundation for food chains, providing food for wildlife, be that through increased fruit and seed set for pollination services, or they may be the main course. Drew, can you hear that lawnmower in the background?
I cannot.
Good. I'm not going to worry about it then. All right. Pollinators also perform services that are invaluable to the world and U.S. economy and agricultural services. In fact, 75% of our crops worldwide require animal pollination. 1 of every 3 bites of food we eat is attributed to animal pollination. And as these images in the slide show, our choices for most fruit, vegetables, nut, and seed crops and staples such as coffee, chocolate, and oils would be drastically reduced, if not absent, without pollination services. Other plants that provide fiber, raw materials, hardwoods, and medicines would also be in jeopardy. This equates to $29 billion in the US alone and $220 to $577 billion in the global agricultural economy. However, as you may be aware, these all-important species are in trouble. 41% of our global insect population has declined in the past decade alone. including important pollinators such as butterfly species that declined 53%, beetle species 49%, and bee species 46% decline. Their decline has a cascading effect on our food supply and economy, to wildlife and biodiversity, and to ecosystem function and resilience. So why are our pollinators declining? Why are they in trouble? There are several pressures on pollinators that are contributing to their decline. This slide shows 4 main reasons for that. Through agriculture and urban sprawl, we are losing valuable lands that once supported pollinators with native plants. And the remaining areas outside of agriculture and urban areas are experiencing an increase in invasive species that are outcompeting our native plant species for natural resources. Farming practices are not what they used to be 100 years ago. Agricultural systems are larger, have become large areas of monoculture, are less tolerant for plant diversity adjacent to cropland. Coupled with this, we see free use of pesticides, both insecticides that directly affect insects and herbicidal use in ditches and perimeters. And farmers are not alone with that prophylactic use of pesticides. Urban landowners freely use over-the-counter insecticides without reading the label to find out if the insecticide that they are using is toxic to bees. Climate change has caused a mismatch in the flowering of plants in our landscape with bee emergence and life cycles. And extreme weather events of sudden drops of temperature, gale-like conditions, and torrential downpours can have a significant effect. And we have heard of late the increase in honeybee pathogens and diseases, and do know that these can be transferred to native bees. These pressures act on pollinators and insects independently and interdependently. Any one of these pressures has an effect. And as we know, as individuals, if we have multiple stresses on us, we are less able to be resilient and healthy. So what can we do? If we look at the images in the slide, we can see we can have a direct impact with farming practices and how our landscapes, both agriculture and urban, look and function. We can help bees and insects to be resilient by mitigating the loss of habitat by keeping, enhancing, creating diverse habitats on our properties and agricultural landscapes, and examining and making changes in our pesticide use. And through native plant diversity, we can offer bees and other insects healthier foraging. And with large acreage of our farmland, we can be installing different conservation practices and set-asides to support pollinators and other insects. And the conversion of marginal land to prairie grasslands not only support pollinators, beneficial insects and birds, but can sequester a significant amount of carbon in the soil. We can create and provide habitat for them, especially in places where it is most absent, such as urban, suburban, and agricultural landscapes, which have become habitat deserts. And by far, the greatest impact we can have is for each and every one of us to create habitat that provides pollen, nectar, and overwintering and nesting opportunities for pollinators and other imperiled insects. Pollen enriched with phytochemicals is important for bee and wasp health. The result of the pollen they gather and bring back to their nesting sites and incorporate into honey is considered functional food. Diversity of floral resources equates to diversity of phytochemicals. Phytochemicals help bees to tolerate cold, fight off infections, heal wounds, and live longer. And certain phytochemicals help bees resist pesticides by internal detoxification processes and metabolism from heightened gene expression. Flowering plants are the most diverse phylum on Earth after insects. They exhibit an astonishingly diverse array of growth form, flower size, color, shape, fragrance, and arrangement. The correlation between insect pollinators and flower characteristics is one of the great examples of co-evolution interdependency. Let's first consider this from the pollinator's perspective. The majority of pollinating insects are generalists. This means they visit and utilize and pollinate a diversity of flowering genera. Some are genera specific and limit their visits to several species within a genera. However, some insect pollinators have evolved highly specialized relationships with individual plant species. The same is true for plants when considering their reproductive needs. For example, the federally threatened eastern fringe prairie orchid is only pollinated by night-flowering hawk moths. Many Lepidoptera or butterfly and moth species have specialized reproductive relationships that evolved with specific host plants. Some butterfly species have evolved obligate relationships with a specific host plant or plant genera. For instance, the monarch butterfly rely on milkweed species for larval development. Carner blue butterfly relies on wild lupin. Swallowtails have both specialized and more generalized relationships, such as the zebra swallowtail reproduces only on pawpaw tree, spice bush swallowtail butterfly that reproduces on spice bush and sassafras. Eastern tiger swallowtail can reproduce on tulip tree, wild black cherry, and ash species. And black swallowtails can successfully reproduce on many different species of the parsley family, including parsley, dill, fennel, carrot, golden Alexanders, and common rue. However, to better support native bees and lepidopteras, we need to provide all habitat components throughout their life stages. Not only do we need to supply a diversity of floral resources, but also nesting habitat for depositing eggs and for larval development, as well as habitat for overwintering. As I said before, the majority of bee species live a solitary lifestyle. They nest and overwinter in cavities under bare and undisturbed soil, woody debris, pithy stems, such as raspberry, elderberry, and sumac, hollowed stem vegetation, and under leaf litter. Bumblebees are social bees like the European honeybee. These bees live in colony nests or hives. They build nests in rodent burrows, rock walls, cavities in deadwood, compost piles, and bunch grasses. Keeping these last two slides in mind, you can understand that it is important to keep these elements in your yards, garden, and larger landscapes, along with providing a diversity of floral resources. Along with the need of host plants, lepidopters need floral resources for nectar. Many species of lepidopter also need undisturbed woody debris and leaf litter for overwintering habitat. So what we're looking at when we're considering creating and enhancing habitat in our yards and agricultural landscapes is restoring biodiversity to support intricate networks of ecological processes that can function as reproductive and resilient ecosystems. So what that means, We want to keep and create species richness and diversity, structural diversity, and functional diversity. So let's concentrate on our urban and suburban landscapes. These are 3 guiding strategies for habitat, native habitat conservation in our landscapes. Keep what we have in the way of natural habitat, enhance the habitat that we have, and create habitat in our gardens, backyards, communities, and cities. Let's talk about what to keep in your yard. Keep leaves in our gardens and along fences. Keep stems in our gardens until the Mother's Day. Keep piles of branches in strategic areas. Keep leaves under shrubs. Leave those piles of rocks from a project. Leave patches of bare or sparsely vegetative soil. Allow fallen woody debris as part of your habitat design, and leave hollow stemmed branches and stems. Leave dead branches and limbs where you can, and consider stopping the use of herbicides on your lawn to allow violets and dandelions to grow. And don't condemn the empty lot, and identify and tolerate those weeds in our yards and lawns. These may be of a special purpose to insects. And when considering enhancement or creation of pollinator habitat, we often first think about plant material selection. And a lot of those questions or that poll said that you were interested in material selection. Habitat needs a diversity of wildflower species. That means it's a diversity of bloom time and season. We need a diversity of flower shape, form, size, and color, and a diversity of duration, whether they're annuals, biennials, or perennials. We need a diversity of graminoids or grasses and sedges. And we need a diversity of trees and shrubs. Trees and shrubs are often overlooked as supportive to insect pollinators. Many woody species provide the earliest spring flowers, such as willows, dogwoods, serviceberries, New Jersey tea, maples, and buttonbush, among many others. And they provide structural diversity. When planting woody species, think about not only planting the perimeters or placement of specimens in your lawns, maybe plant a hedgerow or islands to provide vital floral resources, but also serve as windbreaks to assist pollinator foraging activities and provide deadwood, leaf litter, and stem litter for overwintering. And leave your high canopy trees. Oak trees in particular are known to support more Lepidoptera diversity than any other woody genus. Select plants appropriate for a geographical location, i.e. within the plant's native range. Select plants appropriate for site conditions, for example, upland mesec or dry versus lowland moist or wetland. And select local and bioregional genotype. And make sure there is a minimum of 3 blooming species per season. Include in your design at least 2 milkweed species, and design a diversity of flower color, shapes, and sizes. Please, when considering non-native plants, cultivars, or nativars in your gardens, know that they will likely reduce ecosystem function and services for many of our native specialist bees. The relationship that specialist bees and native plants have provided has happened since insects and plants began to evolve together. There could be a reduction in native insects, insectivores, specialist pollinators, local diversity, interactive diversity, and ecosystem function, and food webs can be diminished. Think about reaching a goal of 35 to 70% native species in your yard, in your garden, and on your farm. So let's scale these strategies to our larger agricultural landscape. Let's look at all the areas that you may already have habitat components that are supporting imperiled insects, or areas that you can enhance if you choose to do so. Keep leaves and stems on the perimeter, under shrubs and hedges, along fences. Leave branch piles, tuck in old hay bales under hedges, pile rocks and bricks under shrubs. Leave patches of bare or sparsely vegetative soil. Leave dead branches on shrubs and hedgerows and allow fallen woody debris to lay. Leave those pithy and hollow stems of raspberry, elderberry, sumac, and forbs such as goldenrods and Joe Pye weed. Allow milkweed and Canada goldenrod to exist in areas of your farmland. Identify plants in your ditches and learn if they need to be regarded or treated as weeds. And embrace the wild areas of your farm and create native habitat with the many conservation practices that support native insects that can benefit your farm. The benefits of native habitat that you can garner are biodiversity that supports pollinators and their pollinator services, beneficial insects that may offer natural pest control, productivity and sustainability of crops, soil and water health, and healthy bees. And like for pollinators, native diversity can provide essential habitat for resources to support beneficial insects with nesting, forage, and shelter. With an increase of plant diversity, there is often an increase in natural enemies to crop pests, such as lady beetles, soldier beetles, predatory mirids, crab spiders, hoverflies, minute pirate bugs, and lacewings, just to name a few. All these species aid in natural pest control and benefit by increased native habitat. Here are some typical habitats and conservation practices that can be created on agricultural land. Read through this list, and as we explore some of these further, envision areas in your farmland where these might be located. Hedgerows. Hedgerows restore and promotes pollinators. They increase floral abundance, bee nesting sites, support pollinators and native natural enemies. They increase species richness and diversity and enhance native pollinator abundance and diversity. They provide pollination services to adjacent crops and support less common native bee species. And a diversity of shrubs in a hedgerow is key. Flower strips is another habitat that you can create within your agricultural landscape called, flower strips, sorry. A diversity of perennial native flowering forbs and grasses that provide floral resources throughout the growing season. They can benefit pest control services in adjacent fields with enhanced abundance of native enemies and increased pollinator services. They can be standalone plantings implemented in row cropping systems and planted adjacent to hedgerows and windbreaks. Utilizing native prairie species adjacent to stream banks and drainage ditches, stabilize banks, retain water and soil, support water quality downstream, and increase soil health to adjacent fields, reduce erosion and soil loss, and reduce water usage. Prairie species not only stabilize banks and lower erosion, there is a significant increase in macroinvertebrate and fish diversity downstream. Prairie species located at banks provide these benefits by their very long roots that can penetrate 10 to 20 feet into the soil, and their stems slow down lateral movement of stormwater and captures eroded soil. Their long roots also increase organic matter through their constant sloughing and regrowth of root hairs and roots. And with an increase of organic matter, we see an increase in water holding capacity of the soil. And the roots can also assist the infiltration of water into the soil. All these attributes can dramatically reduce stormwater runoff and keep moisture in the soil. Prairie strips were first promoted by Iowa State University and adopted in agricultural systems in Iowa to mitigate a conservation concern of soil erosion on cultivated sloped farmlands. Crops are planted on the contour of the slopes, and these strips are integrated at prescribed intervals on the contour. Basically, they're wildflower strips with a bit more grass component. As you can see from the numbers in the slide, there is a significant reduction of lateral water runoff, soil loss and movement, and phosphorus and nitrogen runoff, with no increase in the presence of weeds in adjacent fields. The focus of this practice was a soil and water concern, yet it has the secondary benefit of providing pollinator habitat. Soil health increases in ecosystems with high plant diversity. We often think about plants as the foundation of above ground food webs. However, plant composition and diversity also affects below ground food webs. Studies show that with an increase of plant diversity, there is improved soil microbe diversity, increase in soil function and services, and improvement in plant fitness and soil quality through greater microbial interactions with mycorrhizae plants, and in turn has a positive effect on soil fertility and nutrient cycling. With any of these habitat creations on these slides, you are increasing biodiversity on your farmland and in turn, pollinator and beneficial insect resilience. Creating any one of these habitats on your land is good, but creating a diversity of these habitats on your land is even better. And you increase these benefits even further when you place one aside another, like a wildflower strip next to a hedgerow or windbreak. Cover crops not only protect and build soils, but if let the flower can provide floral resources for pollinators and beneficial insects. And think about the benefit of turning marginally productive or non-productive areas into invertebrate habitat. Do know that there are resources to assist you with any of these native habitats. One resource is through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS, and their partners. These native habitats are considered conservation practices, and there are many other conservation practices that indirectly support pollinators, insects, and wildlife while addressing soil and water conservation concerns. Your local NRCS office or partner office is where you can seek technical advice and possibly apply for financial support with the Farm Bill Cost Share Program. NRCS has a 5-step program to assist you. The first step is to have a conversation. Get free technical advice about conservation plans on your farm. The next 4 steps are optional. Those are for financial cost share programs. And even if you go so far as to step 4 and your plan is ranked high and you were offered a cost share award, until you sign on the dotted line, you are not committed. And do know that NRCS is not a regulatory agency, and conversations and visits to your farm are private and in confidence. Besides NRCS, these are some of my favorite resources. Pollinator Partnership, which I will talk about in a minute. The Xerces Society, wonderful website. This is where I think Drew will put in the chat these links.
Yes, I can do that.
Great, wonderful resources at the Xerces and books and publications. MSU Pollinator Initiative. They have great programs. They have plant lists. They have case studies, and they have a wonderful pollinator champion program that you take and you study and you become a pollinator champion. And MSU Native Plants and Ecosystem Services have also plant lists and case studies. The Ohio State University Bee Lab have wonderful webinars. Heather Holmes' website, you can download lists of plants that are adaptable to different soil and light conditions. Michigan Flora Online is my go-to for confirmation of identification, but also you see a range in Michigan where these plants are native to, and you find out the habitat that they normally are found, and you find out also soil wetness that these plants prefer. MNFI, or Michigan Natural Features Inventory, is a wonderful resource that if you have land or woods that you wonder what native plants used to be there or could now be there, you can get that information there. The Wildflower Association of Michigan is a wonderful organization. They just had their conference last weekend. And there's great resources there. And of course, the Wild Ones. The Ann Arbor Wild Ones chapter is amazing. And there's excellent resources through their membership, very savvy membership. Pollinator Partnership, please visit our website where you will find several programs and resources such as the bee-friendly farming, bee-friendly gardening. You will find eco-regional planting guides, school garden kits, and there's a learning center. You will also be introduced to the North American Pollinator Protection Campaign, and you can find out more about Pollinator Week, June 19th to the 25th, and how you can participate. And I want to bring to your attention Project Wingspan for 3 reasons. I want to thank everyone who donated milkweed through the Washtenaw County Conservation District. Your donations were a huge impact on achieving our overall milkweed collection effort. And although Project Wingspan ends in Michigan after we send awards of seeds and plugs this winter and spring, the native seed collection training webinar will remain available to learn best management practices of native seed collection. And I'd like to introduce you to our technical trainings. This year, we will be having a technical in-person training for agricultural landowners and consultants. It'll be July 12th. It'll be at the Traver Nichols Research Center in Fenville. It will cover a lot of topic that I tried to cover in a very short period, but in much more depth. And you will see exemplary pollinator habitat, hear about case studies, and the latest in MSU research of pollinators in cropping systems. And in 2020, our technical pollinator habitat workshop was virtual. So you can access that through this webpage. And our target audience was for public land managers and stewards, but those best management practices for implementing and maintaining pollinator habitat is transferable to farms and also smaller scales. And if you go to pollinator.org, NRCS Michigan, that's our Liaison Michigan resource page, where you'll see a picture of me doing my very favorite thing on the farm, prescribed burns, in which I'm going to do after this webinar. You will learn more about 5 steps to assistance with NRCS, more information about NRCS Farm Bill programs, how to locate your local NRCS office and partners, but please feel free to contact me and I can help you with that. You will find links to information about cover cropping for pollinator and beneficial insects, farming for bees, a guideline for providing native bee habitat on farms. You'll learn more about Monarch Joint Venture and the Fish and Wildlife Partners for Wildlife Program, and a link to the Michigan Prescribed Fire Council. And there is a survey at the end that you can fill out to let me know what you need in the way of understanding more about pollinator habitat in Michigan. And this is where that Control-Shift-3 key or Command-Shift key, if you want to copy that, these are some of my favorite reference books. Notice there's 2 from Xerces, one specific to farms. The second one is Farms and Urban Landscapes. There's Heather Holmes' Pollinators book, which is as much entomological as it is horticulture. It covers all these native plants. It tells you when it blooms and what these plants need in the way of gardening or site selection. And she also tells you what insects that it supports. Let's see, there's several books by Doug Tallamy. Steiner's book, Landscaping with Native Plants in Michigan, is very informative. The Newcomb's Wildflower Guide is my go-to for plant identification. An older book, but I love it, the New England Wildflower Society Guide to Growing and Propagating Wildflowers. And another book, and that's not, it's actually Shirley, Restoring Tallgrass Prairie. And off to the right of this slide, Prairie Moon Catalog has a lot of good information, and I use that especially for propagating, but also site selection. So I hope with our efforts in our yards and farmlands, each and every one of us can contribute in small and big ways to support our pollinators that offer pollination services, support food security, supports other beneficial insects to help with natural pest control, supports wildlife, supports soil health and water filtration, mitigates erosion control and stream bank stabilization, enhances carbon sequestration, and creates ecosystems that are resilient and contribute to a greater landscape. And it opens up an expanded ways to look at our gardens and landscapes to enjoy and sink our creative energy into. And while we focus on and strive to enhance the land beneath our feet, we can also gain the appreciation of how our lands are connected to and are part of a greater landscape. There's a link here. The NAPSI would like you to take a survey to find out more about what you know about pollinators and what questions you might have. And Drew will put that in the chat. And that is the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank you. Don't hesitate to contact me, and also don't get too troubled about all of it. I am a good faith ecologist. I just love planting native plants, and I know that what I plant, they will come, and I will be supporting them. So just have fun with it. Go to the expo, buy plants.
Connie, awesome. Thank you so much for that great presentation. That was a ton of awesome resources. I think everyone's going to have homework for a month. And I also loved kind of your wrap up at the end, that kind of field of dreams statement. If you build it, they will come. You know, that gives a little bit of inspiration that we can do something. We can turn this around. So we've got some questions here in the chat for you. This first one goes back to, let's see, I think it's towards the beginning of your presentation, where you are asked, or you're talking about the decline in populations of pollinators. And this person wants to know if you can explain more about how that decline is measured and determined, and maybe like the organizations that are involved in doing that measurement.
Well, yeah, let me go back to the slide, and that's going to make you dizzy, isn't it? What? There we go. That's way, you know, I could have started at the beginning, and all right. So there's the source there. And I would do your Control Shift 3 key or your Command Shift 3 key and take a screenshot of that. And it will probably you can go to their website and find out how it's measured.
Awesome. Thank you, Connie. So the next question we've got is, how can it be made more safe to allow ground nesting bees? And I think they asked, you know, should you fence around the area? It seems like maybe they're worried about people stepping in the area or maybe children getting into it. So is there kind of a recommendation you have on how to demarcate that on your landscape?
I don't, but in thinking about it, well, two things. One, I have found little holes along the fence when I was working and planting other plants in there. And it's not like they come out and defend themselves or the area. In fact, most of them, they go in and they put their eggs down, and it's like honey, but it's called something else. And an entomological person watching could probably chat that term in, but they put the eggs, they put that on top of it, they put more eggs, they put more on top, and they build it up like that. And then she just leaves. And so, and then the larvae hatch, and then they eat that and they work themselves out. And so from protecting from people, I don't think it's necessary. If you want to protect it from people digging and stuff, go out and explore. They're fun to see, these little holes, and you'll see quite a few of them if the ground is just right. And sure, put a fence up. just tell people don't dig around in there. I don't think walking or playing there is an issue. It's more of not digging and destroying those nests.
Good to know. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. So the next question we have is someone who says they thought that dandelions were not beneficial for native pollinators, and they couldn't remember if there was another alternative. I think this was back when you were talking about lawns and kind of leaving, leaving dandelions, leaving clover. And I guess my impression is maybe, if you're going to have a lawn, leave some of these typical weed species because those actually help feed.
Right.
But, I'm guessing a lawn is not as good as, putting in a native pollinator garden. But yeah, if you could just clarify kind of the dandelion, are they good for pollinators? Are they not?
Yeah. So, there was a no mow May thing and I did that and I watched dandelions, and honest to God, I didn't see any bees working them. But it was a big movement. So I figured, well, somebody out there must know that this is good, right? I don't honestly know, but I have seen them work clover and violets. And I just like leaving these things in my lawn. I don't like using herbicide. And I like letting my lawn go summer dormant. It's just being dormant. And I'm actually going to play around with some of my sandier areas where there's lawn and actually put some wildflowers in there so that once it goes dormant, those wildflowers will grow and flower. And then at the end of the fall, when the lawn starts growing again, I can either cut those down or let the whole thing overwinter. But that's just me going to play around with it. I'm not suggesting you all do that, but it might be kind of fun if you try it.
That does sound fun, kind of intermixing.
I do want to comment on that as well. The way I've explained it to people is that plants are all beneficial to pollinators, but some are better, some are worse. It's just like us eating our broccoli or going to get McDonald's. We're still getting nutrients in one way or another, but it's not always good. But you're still being fed in the same sense. So that's the way I think about it. So even if you have a yard that is mostly non-natives, but you contribute some natives, you can just think of it, how healthy are my pollinators and what kind of nutrients and good stuff are they getting? But food is food.
Food is food, yeah. But I'll go back and say, just try right now. Bee Friendly Gardening program is saying 70% of our area should be native plants. And it gets back to that cultivar, nativar thing, because every time, so two things, every time plants are changed, something else visually, something else changes in that plant as well. And also we know that insects and native species evolve together. We know that works. We don't know about the other.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I want to say one more caveat about, leaving flowering weeds in your lawn. Unfortunately, if you do end up treating your lawn and some of those weeds like dandelion or clover, violet, that you might consider weeds, are in bloom, you could actually, that could be a detriment to pollinators if they do actually end up going to those flowers while they're in bloom and after having been treated with something. So timing is important as well.
It is, yeah, I agree.
All right, Connie, the next question. Can you suggest strategies for establishing, oh, here you go, native desirable plants in weedy areas? So maybe for their example, they gave along a creek edge that has lots of grass, also bindweed, some other things growing there.
Okay, so the situation is next to a bank, is that right?
It sounds like for their kind of example, it's along a creek edge. Yep.
So, on a slope, it's kind of scary because if you pull out things, well, then you're making some erosion possibly happen. In that situation, I would just intercede, maybe scruff up a little soil here and there, throw some seed or buy some plugs and put it in there. And if possible, once things start maturing, then you can start pulling things out. And bindweed is not something that you just pull out. I mean, you have to follow it down and get those roots very carefully. And you can do spot herbicide, putting herbicide on a glove and, you know, pulling it along the leaves, that sort of thing. But I would try to keep the vegetation in place in slopes and do interplanting and interseeding.
Thanks, Connie. Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely don't want to erode banks and cause a bigger issue.
Right.
So the next question there, Connie, is it counterproductive to try to attract native pollinators while also feeding birds?
Oh, interesting. I don't think so. And there's my good faith ecologist coming through. I would say that there's a balance, and the more population that you have of native insects, yes, the more population you're going to have of birds. A lot of our bird decline is because we don't have as many insects, especially Lepidopteras. So yes, you know, you might be attracting some pollinators for other wildlife, but that's the balance. You know, they can be the main meal. And I don't see it being that they're going to get wiped out by the birds.
Yep, everybody's got to eat. And, you know, if you're strengthening the number of pollinators in your backyard or in your farm, just like you were saying, you know, especially the caterpillars, and then, you know, you're going to be feeding those birds and it's going to go up the food chain. So it's actually, you know, you're doing an even better job if you're bringing birds into your yard and kind of keeping that whole system working.
And if you think about it, you know, before we got involved, it was in balance. And so pollinators and insects were around, birds were around, and it all worked out that both of them were resilient. Both insects and birds were more populated and resilient.
Awesome. Thanks, Connie. So the next one is, are there any suggestions for encouraging small municipalities to plant more native species in their parks or natural areas?
So the first part of that was how to encourage?
Yeah, I think they're looking for ideas on how to encourage municipalities to plant more native plants.
So couple of thoughts there. I mentioned the OSU, or Ohio State University, website and the webinars. And if you go to one of their webinars, one of them, I can't remember the name, but if you look for Damon, in fact, I used one of his slides in here. I'm going to see if I can find it. No, hang on, right? No. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not finding it. Wait a minute. This is painful. Oh, there he is. There he is. Okay. I think. Damon Hall. He did a whole thing on policy and insect pollinator in cities and towns and municipalities. And so he gave good ideas about that. And you can also contact him. I would also use examples of municipalities that have successfully done this and have conversations with them and bring that to the attention of the city council or zoning or the zoning board. Yeah, and I would check out the MSU website and talk to Megan or Anna at Pollinator Initiative. They might know an extension agent that would actually have that as part of their resource concern and would help you. And then, you know, get the conservation district folks to support you and give you information.
I just linked the YouTube video to that presentation with Damon Hall, policy dimensions of insect pollinators. So that's in the chat.
Oh, well, good for you. Thank you.
Quick.
Man, good.
Awesome. Thanks for those suggestions, Connie. So the next question is, does wood mulch in flower beds or under trees and shrubs provide any benefit to pollinators?
Yes. A lot of the solitary bees will burrow underneath that. I wouldn't have it too thick, but they use that for some of them for nesting and overwintering areas. Could
you like kind of describe what too thick is?
Oh, I wouldn't. So here, I'm just doing an educated guess. 6 inches would be too much. You know, I know you have to put a big lot, a large to keep the weeds down, but I wouldn't go past 6. And I would go to OSU Bee Lab or the MSU Pollinator Initiative, because there was entomologists there and they know their bees, and or Heather Holm, and ask her that question. I'm just going to throw out a guess. These people know what they're talking about.
It's always good to throw it back to the entomologists when in doubt.
I know.
All right, so the next one is, how can I prevent colony forming fast spreading species from overcrowding other native species?
Yeah. So first thing is try to select for things that aren't colony building. And if you want those, then you have to put them in a situation that you just let them grow. Or you will be at it for a long time. You'd have to go through several times a year and do edging and pulling out. And that's too much like work for me. Or you can put in your soil metal or edging that is very deep. A lot of these lawn edgings, you know, they're only about that deep. Those roots will go under it. I'm talking about sheet metal or something that goes really deep. But honest to God, those roots will find their way out of there. It sounds like a good idea, and it might slow them down. But I think just selecting species that aren't doing that, if you want to have a diversity of species in a garden, say you have a small spot and you want lots of different wonderful flowering native plants, don't plant those. And if you want that particular species that colonizes, put it in an area that gets mowed around a lot or has a sidewalk, or it's already contained and it can take that space.
Great suggestions. Yeah. So the next question, Connie, looks like it's about invasive species. And I think it's kind of a particular case, but it's overall asking about, you know, when is it safe to treat for invasive species and like an invasive insect, and what effect does that have on, you know, native insects that we'd like to keep around? So their specific question is about milky spore used to treat Japanese beetle infestations.
Okay.
And they want to know if there's a safe way to reduce the number of Japanese beetles, or if just increasing biodiversity and trying to attract more maybe native beetle predators is the best way to deal with that.
Yeah, I love that last bit of the question, because what we're trying to do is bring things into balance. And right now, a lot of our environments are out of balance, and the Japanese beetle is a problem. There is no, there's not a whole lot of checks and balances for those. A pheromone trap works really well. You're also going to attract lots of them from far away, but you will attract them to your trap. We use that at the farm, at our community garden, and that helps a lot. And that pheromone is specific to the Japanese beetle. The milky spore, I don't know about that, but I believe that that is specific to Japanese beetles, but I don't know if other beetles would be affected. And so you would have to Google on that and find out more on your own, go down that rabbit hole.
So the next one, Connie, let's see, it's not actually a question, but it's from Sue Nearing, and she says that the program my farm is in came from the Soil Conservation District, and it actually pays me more to grow pollinators than I've ever made growing corn and beans. I'm also working on conducting a class on wildflower identification and a follow-up trip in July to, I guess, a field trip to see wildflowers. Awesome.
Good for you.
Sounds cool, Sue.
Yeah, and Sue, I would send me an email. I'd like to learn more about that. I might come to it, or maybe we can pool our resources. Good for you.
All right, so the next one is, as a beekeeper, dandelions are one of the first species to help feed them. Okay, so this is somebody kind of commenting on our previous conversation. Yeah. And they agree, don't use Roundup or another herbicide. Awesome, thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
And then let's see, the next one is, here's a question. Last year, we saw a large increase in poison ivy in the grassy areas where we're trying to leave natural. Any ideas on how to discourage the spread?
Yeah, that's so poison ivy. One thing, they do love is more carbon in the air. So that's interesting. And unfortunately, the only way that I know how to deal with it is to herbicide it in the early spring, not late, because the leaves get really thick and it doesn't take it in. And I do it just in the spring when that new growth is coming up. I'm very judicious. I either use a sponge or a very light spray, and I spot spray. And that, for me, is the only way. You can dig it up, but if you're like me, you'll get covered with oozing, itching sores. And I've gotten my, my Tyvek on and my gloves, and I dig it up. I have done that in very specific situations, small areas. But if you're seeing a lot of it, like at my friend's place in New Era up north of me, it was just popping up everywhere. And as much as we didn't want to use an herbicide, we did. But again, it was very judicious.
Yeah, Connie, I've had similar experiences where I have, had just a little bit of poison ivy and thought, ooh, if I put on enough protective gear, I can dig it up, no problem. I always end up getting a rash, no matter how much protective gear I wear. But-
and your tools get
Right.
infected. So remember,
Right.
if you're gonna use a tool, wash it and wash it and wash it again.
Right. Yep. Use the rubbing alcohol. So that helps strip the oil off of it too. So
Thank you. Yeah, cool.
yeah, it looks like the last question that we have is actually just another comment about something we were talking about earlier, the mulch depth. Regina says, usually about 2 to 4 inches is recommended for planting. And so, if we think bees are capable of getting through that amount, then should be able to use that area.
Yeah, they could easily get through 4 inches. They're strong little beasties.
So we just had another question pop in here. They would like to know, what insect is it that pollinates pawpaw?
Oh, it was one of the swallowtails. Yeah, wait,
Do flies also pollinate it, Connie? Because it has kind of a stinkier flower,
Stinkier
right?
flower, yeah. I'm not an expert on that. So I'm not even gonna go there. I would go down that rabbit hole and find that out and then let us know.
Yeah, I think it's I think flies pollinate it because it's got
Yeah.
that red kind of droopy, little bit
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
not pleasant flower.
No, yeah. And I have friends in Ann Arbor and they grow pawpaws in their yard and they have to hand pollinate it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, probably if you want to get good fruit production.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that pawpaws are a challenge to grow yourself. So. So we've got an answer from Sue, just in case you guys can't see it. The class is at the Caro, Michigan Library on April 30th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. And Patty McNinch from the Soil Conservation Office is spearheading it. And people from the Green Thumb Masters Garden and the Caro Garden Club are helping.
Wow.
And she doesn't know the date yet for the July field trip.
Oh, okay. So it's the 30th and then July is a field trip. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, good to know.
And then Randall also mentioned that he thinks the swallowtail also goes to the pawpaw.
Ooh, good, Randall. Thank you.
Well, Connie, I don't see any. Oh, actually, another one popped in. Maybe zebra butterfly on pawpaw.
Yeah, it was one of the here, might as well just go down.
A lot of interested pawpaw enthusiasts out there.
That's good. I'm just trying to think of so that was actually in my notes, wasn't it? All right. One moment, please. You would think I would know these by heart, but
There's a lot to remember, a lot to keep track of.
Yeah. I didn't want to stumble around and try to remember everything. So I'm sorry, I was reading a lot. But I sense that you guys, the audience is going to be very patient and supportive. So thank you.
We got another question, and
keep looking for my notes.
I think Marietta, if you don't mind actually clarifying your question a little bit more, if you're looking for, a specific situation that you want to establish native plants, or if there's a particular native plant that you're struggling with, give us a little more context for that question.
Yes, it is the zebra swallowtail.
Okay, the zebra swallowtail goes to the pawpaw. All
Yeah.
right. Connie, well, we're waiting for Marietta to clarify her question. I've got one about bee hotels that were very popular for a while, and maybe they're still very popular. But I feel like there was kind of a rush of people putting out bee hotels, and I'm curious your thoughts on, are those a benefit to the pollinator population? can they be detrimental? Does it really just depend on the maintenance? And, you know, if a person is upkeeping that hotel basically and making it sanitary. I know that there, you know, are diseases that can be transmitted that way, and just kind of curious on your take.
So I don't know a lot of it, and it's funny, I was smiling because somebody just gave me one last night, because someone else gave it to him and he didn't know what to do with it. And my good friends, Mark and Adrian O'Brien, had one in Ann Arbor, and I can only repeat a little bit what I learned from them, but they had success in having bees utilize it. Yes, it has to be sanitized. The ones that come with a little straw liners, I think are very good, because you can just pull those out and replace with new ones. But I would take the block, as I anticipate using this one, at the end, once emergence happens and they're cleared out, then I would just poke through those holes really well with a dowel and sanitize it with probably bleach. But I'm hoping somebody in our audience, I almost think Adrian's here because she said she would come. She's in North Carolina, but maybe she would put something in the chat and help us with that.
Well, we kind of wait to see if anyone has suggestions. Marietta has gotten back and she said, so her initial question was how to establish native plants. And she's clarified it by saying that she's had a difficult time getting native bushes and plants to take root and thrive. Her soil is mostly clay and it's a southern facing slope.
Wow.
Yeah. So do you have any suggestions for her?
Oh, yeah. So amendment of the soil, I get it. You have clay soil, but I would do some amending, get some organic matter in there, put some sand in there, amend it so that it isn't going to dry up like a brick in that southern exposure. And you're going to have to amend that soil pretty deep. And I would use a lot of mulch on that because that will break down and also keep building up the soil. And then selecting shrubs for clay soils. I would go to that wonderful native plant expo that you guys are putting on and talk to some of the vendors. Another, you know, who's a good resource for me with questions like that I can't answer is Bill Schneider of Wild Type Nursery. And also his website has a lot of good information on site conditions. But yeah, and I would send you to Bill. He is part of that Wildflower Association of Michigan. He is a very easy to approach gentleman, and he has a head full of knowledge. He grows a lot of these shrubs, and so he is as much about outreach as he is about business.
Awesome. Thanks, Connie. I think that is all that we have time for. You know, people are always welcome to reach out to Washtenaw County Conservation District. Also, we can connect you to some of these resources and nurseries that Connie has mentioned. And yeah, Connie, thanks again. And I will turn it over to Drew.
Thank you so much, Connie. I was looking in the chat and even in the Q&A, people just praising your presentation and that you did a wonderful job and had lots of good resources. We really appreciate you coming on here. And before we sign off, let me go to the next slide. Before we sign off, I wanted to highlight a few upcoming events and encourage you to check out our website at washtenaw.org and to learn more about what we do and sign up to attend or volunteer for events. And if we have any teachers, former teachers, or people part of community groups, we do accept applicants for our school and community habitat grant, so check that out too. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you join us for another event soon.